West has been praising Zelensky as the new Winston Churchill, which just, goes to underscore the level of delusion that has possessed the West. But now you're getting in all quarters, in Washington and London, and Germany, and throughout the rest of NATO, these recriminations being expressed about Ukraine's failure to press the counteroffensive, failure to listen to the advice of the West, that they're always begging for more. So this is starting to become a more common thing. So I think the next natural step, whether the CIA does it or the CIA encourages somebody to do it, I don't think Zelensky's long for the world. He's not the kind of guy that I think is going to be allowed to go off into exile where he'll be sunning himself down in Miami Beach.
Breaking news! President Zelensky is about to be assassinated by Joe Biden. This hot take from former CIA analyst and professional shitster Larry C. Johnson makes him our first nominee for Useful Idiot of the Week award. Guys like Larry thrive on new media like Instagram, TikTok, and Telegram, which just turned 10 years old this week. Most people associate Telegram with Russia, but since the war in Ukraine began, Telegram and other sites like it are the battlefield for the information warfare and propaganda, which makes them very important, and they're just perfect for people like Larry Johnson to spread fabricated messages. Meet Clayton Morris, useful idiot candidate number 2, a journalist who had to flee the US to Portugal after his real estate Ponzi scheme collapsed in 2019. Here he is on the phone with one of his defrauded investors. Let's listen.
No, I mean, the liberal press has had their. That's why the conservative press hasn't touched it, because they know it's a bullshit story.
Clayton, you're literally in Portugal, though.
I'll let you.
Like, you see how that looks. You're actually in Portugal. So, I mean, I think claiming it's bullshit when you've literally left America, that doesn't really make sense, does it?
I don't know how this is any of your business.
Yep, Clayton, baby. When you rip off people of millions of dollars, it's everybody's business now. Pro-Kremlin shills like Larry and Clayton are not just confined to the dark corners of the internet. Some of them are actually on the ground in Ukraine. Meet Patrick Lancaster, a former US naval officer, getting a hard-on about launching kamikaze drones on Ukrainian troops.
I'm Patrick Lancaster, and right now we are in Russian-controlled territory on the front line near the city of Ugledar. Ugledar is controlled by Ukraine forces, but we're here with Russian forces, and we're going to be documenting how they launch FPV kamikaze drone onto Ukrainian military positions. This is something we haven't seen before, and we're happy to bring this to you just because we believe you deserve to see things on both sides of the line.
It's called Vuhledar, you prick. Don't let the press badge fool you. Patrick is not exactly a journalist. The only mainstream channels he's worked for are Russia Today and Zvezda, which is a star, and in fact, he's so bad at his job that he often reveals secrets and compromising Russian military information by just accidents. What a stupid idiot. Thank you.
So now we're going to see Russian forces launching this kamikaze drone.
Hang on a second. Can we get a closer look at the drone? Thanks, Patrick. Good to know exactly what we're up against. Although it looks more like a school science project than a weapon of mass destruction.
About have called me everything from a left-wing hack to a sociopath to even a self-hating Jew.
This joke is Max Blumenthal, a son of former Bill Clinton aide Sidney Blumenthal, and he's our next useful idiot candidate. Max used to be a well-respected journalist working for outlets like the New York Times, the LA Times, and Al Jazeera. But somewhere around 2015, a switch flipped and he began publishing materials consisted of Russian propaganda about the Nazi coup in Kiev or the genocide of Russian-speaking population in Donbas. Taking leave of his gray matter, he set up a far-left website called The Gray Zone, which has downplayed Chinese persecution of the Uyghurs and Assad's human rights abuses in Syria. Since when did the left start literally standing up for authoritarian regimes?
I actually grew up in D.C. during the crack epidemic, and as I watched Zelensky, I mean, getting more and more desperate, he's starting to remind me of the pipeheads that used to follow me home from school. He's like, it's never good enough for him. He's like, the cluster bombs, Biden. They're not hitting like they used to. I need the big one, Biden. I need the nuclear weapon. I need the nuclear. I'll suck your dick, Biden. What I think really happened was that a Biden official, like Tony Blinken or something, came to Vladimir Zelensky and said, we can't find another Jewish guy to cover up for all this Nazi shit. We're just gonna have to get like a Nazi guy in there. So you have to stay in there for as long as possible. Zelensky's Jewish. And Zelensky was like, okay, just gonna keep it going.
I think at this point the word Nazi has begun to lose its meaning. So let me just ask you this. Do Nazis have a free press, democratic elections, freedom of speech, meaningful political opposition? Because Ukraine has all those things. You know who doesn't? A Russia. And I guess China and Saudi Arabia and, well, the list actually goes on, so a lot. But we in Ukraine are fighting to defend our country, our homes, our families. And Ukraine has never once asked for the US or UK or any of our allies to fight this war for us. All we have asked is to give us the things we need to win. So yes, we want cluster bombs. Yes, we want F-16s. No, we don't want nukes. And while it may be fun for champagne socialists like Max to play around with provocative attention-seeking opinions, the reality is that people are dying in Ukraine. Not just soldiers, not just first responders, but all people, women, and children. So this is for you, Max. You won yourself the #1 spot on our Useful Idiots board. If you want to help us pick the next winner, send your favorite examples of pro-Russian propaganda to info@europeanedge.show, and we'll use them on air.
Sources in the Ukrainian security services have told the BBC that they carried out an attack on the Kerch bridge that links Crimea with Russia.
Wait, what? Didn't we just do this 3 weeks ago and last October? Aren't there other places to send Ukrainian attack drones? Like the Kremlin, or Putin's yacht, or Elon Musk's bathroom?
Now that smoke is now coming out of the chimney, and we are holding off before making any kind of declaration because it is at night and it is raining. We want to hold off before any color will be determined.
That's
but
good timing.
It certainly looks, it appears to be white. It is very much white.
Indeed.
And you can see
so
the
then
cheers.
We have a new pope.
We have a new pope, and you can hear the cheers.
After this most recent attack on the Kerch bridge, Russians sent up white smoke in an attempt to obscure the bridge and deter further attacks. Which I think, honestly, may have confused a lot of people across the world.
The smoke is white, which signifies that a new pope of the Roman Catholic Church has been elected.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pope is fine. I repeat, the Pope is fine. The Kerch bridge, however, is not. And Ukraine will keep going at it as long as it remains the only link from mainland Russia to Crimea. Remember this happy day in 2017 when he opened the Kerch bridge?
Since the Tsar's time, people were dreaming to build this bridge. Then, people came back to this idea in the 30s, 40s, and 50s of the past century. At last, thanks to your hard work, your talent, this project, this miracle has happened.
No, Vladimir, this is the real miracle. Remember, Vladi, no amount of smoke and mirrors can hide you or your bridge forever.
I hope. The count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Oh my God! That'll look good?
Yeah.
And just like that, we prove your country's security is an illusion. In the past week, wildfires have devastated the island of Maui, leaving a trail of destruction and a death toll of over 100 people at the time of this recording, making them the deadliest US fires in more than a century. There is absolutely no way to play that for laughs, so we're not even gonna try. Because there's absolutely nothing funny about natural disasters, ever, right?
This is Kim Jong-un.
Unless, of course, they take place in North Korea, where the jokes write themselves, and those jokes never make fun of Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, because if they do, those jokes will disappear in the middle of the night, along with the person that wrote them. The people of North Korea, who, let's face it, have enough to be afraid of, are bracing themselves for tropical storm Kanun. What's so funny about that? Well, let's just say that the North Korean government has some interesting priorities.
Tropical storm Kanun is heading towards North Korea, where citizens have been told they must prioritize safeguarding propaganda portraits of their leaders, according to the country's official newspaper.
That's right. Don't save yourselves, save the portrait of dear leader. So when the storm hits, North Koreans are expected to protect, well, not their family, as I would do, or their pets, but their framed pictures of Kim Jong-un, his dad, and his granddad. Not just the portraits, but the statues too, because he ain't heavy, he's my supreme leader. And if this sounds freaking crazy, it's because it is. Recently, our noisy neighbor, Russia, celebrated its National Air Force Day, a glorious and patriotic event that was marked by stunning displays of air superiority, like crashing this Su-30 into a field near Kaliningrad. That was bingo. Yes, guys, correct. It crashed. The Su-30 accident, which killed 2 pilots on a training exercise, was, no joke, described as a negative takeoff issue by Russian state officials. Meanwhile, Ukraine waits for the world to provide it with better air power and continues to experiment with bold new strategies that don't look quite as bad as this, but you get the idea. We could use a little help. At least, the mighty Russian Air Force is doing some of the work for us by boldly crashing their planes into pretty much anything they can. And to be fair, even outnumbered, Ukrainian air defense has still destroyed over 3,500 Russian air targets since the war began.
И сейчас я хочу сказать еще несколько слов о нашей обыденной жизни. Первое. Медицинские препараты, приобретаемые с бюджета Российской Федерации, гражданам иностранным, то есть гражданам Украины, выдаваться не будут. В первую очередь это касается инсулиновых. Точно так же будет касаться выдачи гуманитарной помощи и других вопросов тех людей, которые до настоящего времени не оформили паспорта страны, в которой они проживают. Обращаясь к вам сейчас, всем предлагаю определиться, как мы дальше будем жить, где вы будете жить, по каким законам. Если вас не устраивают законы Российской Федерации, просьба собирать вещи и готовиться на выезд.
That cherry chap is Alexander Dudka, the Russian-appointed head of the occupied village of Lazurne in Kherson province. He is informing locals that they will be denied basic humanitarian care and medicine if they do not accept a Russian passport. Dudka then went on to inform citizens that a failure to accept a Russian passport would also result in their children being taken away and forced to fight on the front lines for Russia. Who knew? Russian citizenship came with so many perks. Of course, this isn't the first time Russia has used the power of the passport to control ordinary citizens.
At borders in Russia's east, south and west, thousands of Russian men are trying to escape conscription. Lines of cars stretched several kilometers at the Zemolasi crossing into Georgia Thursday. There were similar scenes at the Kazakhstan and Mongolian borders. Traffic has more than doubled on Russia's frontier with Finland.
When terrified potential conscripts tried to flee the country to escape fighting in Putin's dirty war, they often had their passports confiscated right at the border. And Russian elites were not any safer, with the Kremlin worried about the huge amount of wealth that might leave the country. Government officials and even members of inner circle of Putin suddenly found that their passports niet good. All of this makes it pretty hard for the Kremlin to sell the idea that the war has the full-throated support of Russian citizens. If they like it so much, why are they trying so hard to leave? Well, the answer to that might lie with the people who actually want a Russian passport. Like Gérard Depardieu, who clings to Russia for its expertise in tax dodging, shady finances, and fatty foods. Or this fascist fanboy Steven Seagal, who praises Vladimir Putin as the greatest leader alive today. And even fugitive whistleblower Edward Snowden, who chose Russia only after he realized that no other nation on earth would really take him. In short, they're all there because Russia is a cesspool of corruption that they can play to their own advantage. It is simply not fair to say that all Russia does is bomb innocent men, women, and children. Sure, the violence takes up a lot of time on their agenda, but they somehow still find time for a bit of stealing too. And by a bit, I mean all the stealing.
Mining residential territory when retreat, and they steal everything they find.
What do the Russians steal? They steal Ukrainian art, they steal Ukrainian grain, they steal Ukrainian children. Or, as this new segment puts it,
cowardly looters without education and even without appropriate food supplies. Russian army became famous for stealing toilets when they invaded civilized Georgia. That weird gadget impressed savages so much that they started to pull it out to take home. Money, high-tech, Russians always steal when they can.
And Russia does not just steal from Ukraine. For a country that is meant to be the sworn enemy of the United States, they sure seem to lean on the young American big dogs pretty heavily when it comes to television. If imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, then Russian TV is one big love letter to the US OA. You thought it was just wall-to-wall propaganda. No, it's also a lot of, let's say, homages to American television. For example, the US has Ugly Betty.
Ugly Betty.
Russia has Don't Be Born Beautiful. The US has It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, because Dennis is a bastard, man!
Russia has It's Always Sunny in Moscow.
Если у друзей свой бар, но в баре этом пусто.
Yep, and also the US has The Nanny. Russia has Moya Prekrasnaya Nyanya, which is The Nanny. And sometimes they're so theft-hungry, they don't bother to make their own version. Since major US film studios are boycotting Russia, Russian cinemas have been making a plan. And that plan is to show pirated copies of Barbie on the big screen. According to a report in the Newsweek, a film critic complained after a pirated Barbie screening in the city of Tyumen contained an, I quote, poor voice dubbing and pop-up gambling advertisements. Wow, come on Barbie, let's go party. Ooh, 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 yeah. Well, no, that sounds like an authentic piracy experience. All that's missing is for you to leave the movie theater with a virus. At least Russians can still see Barbie. They don't seem to be doing the same thing with Oppenheimer, which I loved. Maybe they don't want to be reminded that the atomic bomb was yet another thing they stole.
Thanks God, the same one, the same. Here you can see the menu. Okay, breakfast. I think it's like the same.
And for all we know, even the potatoes are stolen.
The overall IQ level is obvious in this photo. They were sent for demilitarization, but first of all, these Russian looters demilitarized their own vehicles with the stolen potato.
So in summary, should be stealing. And this should surprise no one. Because in some countries, the government has ties to organized crime. In Mother Russia, the government is organized crime. And we are coming to the guest studio. My guest today is Jaap Arriens, a Dutch visual journalist based in Warsaw who contributes to AFP, CNN, and many other major outlets. He's been covering politics and sport news and other news in the Central Eastern European region for the last 10 years, and he's been living in Poland for the last 10 years. Welcome, Jaap.
Thank you for having me.
Very first question is very direct. Why Dutch flag is a French flag, but just turned?
Well, that's a good question because, you know, the French and the Dutch have almost nothing in common at face value. So I don't see it, you know, I can't, you know, really clarify that. The only thing I could say is just don't talk about this to the Dutch people. The Dutch are very, very proud, you know, in the sense, not in the same sense as Poland. When you come to Poland, you can feel people, for them being proud is a very important thing.
Yeah.
And the Dutch like to think of themselves as, you know, very sober. We're not proud, which is also a French thing, right? Being proud. And so the Dutch, basically, for them, everything south of Holland, people are not as intelligent as the Dutch.
All right, so French are less intelligent
so
as the Dutch.
probably the French have a flag and they thought, you know what, probably the Dutch think that they admire, that the Dutch are admired and that the Dutch flag is the original one and putting it vertically is not here.
Politics. Are you definitely going to help some outlets covering the upcoming Polish elections.
Yep.
What are you thinking? Where is polling going with the elections when the PiS might lose the majority and everything? So are we going to expect some kind of turmoil or else?
This is probably going to be Europe's most exciting set of elections for a long time to come. A lot of people are very anxious to see the results.
Yeah.
Even I think the ruling party is very anxious to see what the result will be. So I don't expect a lot of turmoil. The previous elections, even though the current party is doing everything they can to help that last, squeeze every little bit of juice out of these elections.
Who would you vote for? Can you vote actually?
I can't vote for.
Well, who would you vote?
But if I would vote, that's a good question, because I don't feel that I identify with the current political party and their policies.
Are you with the Confederation, which is the right one?
But on the other hand, I think the opposition seems toothless.
You've spent the last 18 months helping the media outlets covering the war.
Yeah.
You've been to Ukraine, you've been helping the outlets to receive the footage, and you felt the war. And I'm just curious, from what you see, how the tonality has changed, if it did actually, of the media outlets on the narratives about the war?
It is obvious for anyone who comes there, I think, that there is only one way to cover this conflict, because there's not only an emergency going on in Ukraine, there's an emergency going on in liberal democracy. So for news outlets, it's important, not even just for now, but for posterity, for the future, to reflect the gravity of the situation that is ongoing and probably will be going on for quite a while.
You're helping the viewers of these media outlets like CNN, AFP, and many others, which is millions, to actually see through their eyes the drastic changes of the world through the war lens, let's say. But my question is, do you think you have less work and less money because of TikTokers, bloggers, and all these Instagrammers who would film it right away from the spot, and they're not a journalist or neither a blogger?
It's possible that there is less work in the way we are used to, but on the other hand, the pool also has become much larger. So if you want to, I think you could even do better, even as a traditional videographer, cinematographer, because the market is just, and the opportunities have grown so much. So it's difficult because you have to find a way to pivot and maybe be more creative if you're not really in a niche. But for sure, I think it's a positive development.
Has your rate increased through the war?
It depends on the outlets. So
who pays the most? Is it Americans or French?
I can tell you that the ones who pay the most are the biggest ones.
Okay.
And but they only pay the most if you know how to get paid the most.
Listen, Russia today is the biggest, or one of the biggest. They probably pay the most. Would you work for them?
I would not, no. Before the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I had a very comfortable living working for a Chinese state media outlet. And the day the war started, even though this took a huge chunk out of my income, I emailed my editor and I said, I'm very sorry. I've had a great time working for you guys, and it's nothing personal, but I cannot continue cooperating.
Thank you for that.
That's my point of view. I don't feel that would be the right thing to do. And since then, I've definitely had to, find ways to compensate for this income, but I could not do this personally, no.
And if we would do the rating of the media outlets that you would or would not work for, so RT, no. What about Fox News?
I think that's debatable. There's a lot of good journalists also working for Fox News.
If Tucker Carlson, when he was working there, would invite you to do that for his show, for his program.
It's funny that you mentioned the name because I can't stand the sight of Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, me neither.
So then definitely no, I would not work for a show. But I think Fox News cannot be directly discredited as a bad news outlet. it depends. You know, if, let's say, Trump would win the election and Fox News would go right back to where they were, which means, you know, then I would not do it because they are so flip-floppy when it comes to Russia that, you know, I don't think any journalist worth their salt should then consider working for an outlet like Fox.
What about Pravda.ru?
I guess you're referring to a Russian outlet, which I'm not...
That's more of a jokey thing. Pravda is from Soviet times, the first one, the only, which gets all the propaganda information in it. But of course, you would not work for them.
I don't think I would work for any outlet of which the money ends up in Russian hands, or that does not have abide by journalistic ethics as you know, as they should be. So, you know, if that means they cross any of those lines, I don't think any journalist worth their salt should even consider working for an outlet.
To your triple identity thing in the end. So, what is the thing that you want our audience to know about this region, which is Central Eastern Europe, and this experience is coming out of your 10 years life in here? What is that you want to know? Want us to know?
I think the best way to explain it is through the eyes of a colleague of mine. She she studied in Ukraine for a while, and she's been a correspondent in Warsaw for a year. She just recently wrote a book about her Russian teacher or teacher Russian language who lives in Kiev and her experience about the war. She published a book about this in the Netherlands. And, you know, she comes to Warsaw often, and I say, you know, what do you think about this country and this area of the world that you learn to love and have a fascination for? Don't you see what's happening to personal rights of certain individuals? And she said, yeah, but every time I come here, I'm still surprised, because you can find one end of the spectrum, but on the same day, the complete opposite of that spectrum. You can find all of humanity here, the worst, but also the best. And I think that's one way to describe it. If you would come here, you would never been here before, you would be surprised.
Do you think Ukrainian grain will be transited fine through Poland? Basically, this is part of a bigger question on the tensions, which are ongoing tensions. Are those tensions fueled because the elections are here in Poland, or those are national interest defense by Polish government?
You know, this is an interesting question, because for the Polish government, this is one of many very contentious issues where they're torn between two sides. Yeah. They are dependent on the farmers as their electorate on the one hand. On the other hand, you know, there's also for them money to be made to transition Ukrainian grain. There's interest for the rest of the world for Ukrainian grain to go through Poland. But I think until the elections, we will not see a decision on this. They're going to postpone this. And until then, it's going to remain a mystery, I think.
And with this mystery, we're going to end. Thank you so much, Yap, for being with us. And I'm going to see you in a moment. And that's our time here on the European Edge for today. As always, we want to hear from you. Tell us more, what stories you like or dislike. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel here on The Gaze. And also comment, like, dislike. We need your attention. And also, my name is Andrii Suslenko, and I'm going to see you next week. Bye.